and are just some of the words that you may hear in today's podcast. Enjoy!
Hello and welcome to the Perfect Information Podcast, a board game podcast of ghostly games. I meet men, dogs, and the monster in the closet.
Yoderos Panagiotides? Alright, Ben, I'm not going to say the storm is coming, but it is windy, it is cold, and you still have all our bags. Could you please hurry up?
What?
Hurry up. Bags in cabin.
Oh, God. Oh.
Yes?
Oh, God. Why do I always have to bloody carry everything, Georgios?
Because you're much more fit than I am.
But you, the other day, you were lifting those two poodles as if they weighed nothing on the way to this cabin in the woods.
Yes, I did, because they did in fact weigh nothing. They were not poodles, they were made of aluminum foil, and they were dinner.
So you can lift food.
I can lift food.
You can't lift our bags.
No, because we don't eat our bags. See, it makes perfect sense.
Oh, but anyway,
Hopefully we won't eat our bags.
you know, I don't think, Georgios, literally, that there's anything ominous about going to a isolated cabin in the woods in October.
Yeah. Did you say you don't think literally?
I don't think literally.
Right.
Anyway, can you light the fire? You have that magic Mediterranean touch.
Do you mean a lighter?
That's right.
Yes, I can do that. Do you need some privacy?
That's my I'm now comfortable in the cabin noise, Georgios.
So that's a yes then.
Yes, please. 25 seconds later. Oh, right. So, what are we talking about today, Georgios?
Death.
That's not ominous.
No, it's a name of a Swedish folk group. But also, we're talking about the death of board games. Not generally, but specifically, like individually, or the reasons for it. We're basically considered as coroners of board games in a generic sense.
So that time when I got out my carving knife, and I just got it, and I stuck it in the game repeatedly, and I broke the game's lungs with my knife, and then I cut the game's tongue out, and I waved the tongue in its face while its scared eyes were looking at me, and then I poked its eyes out with some barbecue skewers. Like that.
When you say game, do you mean that British guy that sort of talked to you funny in that pub last time?
Georgios, don't mention this. This is a public thing. I'm trying not to go to the prison.
Okay, alright.
Alright, so, what kills games, Georgios? So we're going to start from the personal and go out to the world.
Sure, let's do that.
So let's talk about the first thing, a bad play experience.
I've had those.
How does a bad play experience kill a game?
Well, basically, it attaches a lot of negative memories, emotions, and expectations to a play experience, and once that sort of hits a certain limit, you develop a natural aversion to picking up that game again. Or put differently, you're so mad at the game and or the people that you never want to see one or the other, or rather the combination of the two together again.
So it's like a Pavlovian response, is that what you're saying?
Maybe, yeah.
It's sort of in the hindbrain, and, you know, whenever you see that game, uncontrollable negative thoughts pop up.
Yes, pretty much, yeah.
And so when has this happened to you?
Twice. Luckily, funnily enough, involving the same player.
Now, do you think there's a common denominator to these experiences, Georgios?
Yes, probably, but not the one you seem to be hinting at.
Is
I
it
think.
Jacob the dickhead?
No, it's Steve.
You should, frankly,
it's always Steve.
You should have known that his surname is the dickhead. You should have known before you sat down with him, Georgios.
See that problem? I see that was the problem. I thought it was his surname and not his nickname. See,
Nominative determinism. So even if it had been his surname, he would have grown up to be a dickhead.
Does that mean you're supposed to turn into a rabid dog at some point?
Mad ox, Georgios. Rabid cow. You've seen me in the morning, Georgios.
Yeah, sadly.
Apt.
Quite. Yes, but basically,
It's like Johnny Bidcock.
he does.
He owns a large amount of
Hens.
rather no, not hens, cocks, male chickens, Georgia.
I know. I was trying again. I'm trying to steer away towards family friendliness.
Yeah, this is the kind of humour that just keeps the people coming back for more.
Yes, pretty much.
Anyway, so tell us about
My bad
Bob
experiences.
the dickhead.
Well, basically, both of them involved people more or less blowing up at each other and not really solving those tensions in any sensible way afterwards. They just sort of lingered and eventually were forgotten and sort of left in the past. But they were never actually resolved. One of them was a game of Game of Thrones. Actually, 3 games. Game of Thrones, Space Cadets Dice Duel, and Cosmic Encounter. All of which included some form of very negative response by one of the players.
Was there just a refusal to get in on the spirit of the game? Was that what it was?
Maybe.
I find this unseemly, I find this beneath me, I find this childish, therefore I'm not going to participate.
No, it was more of a case of I've agreed to play this once or twice. It was a very bad experience for me. I have no desire to risk another experience like that again, which sure makes sense. I mean, if you've had a very, very bad experience with the game, you are reticent to just return to it on the promise that this time it will be different, because sometimes the experience was bad enough that you do not want to risk it.
Well, it's interesting because Jeff Engelstein has this rule that he often talks about, which is, if you're having a bad time with the game, stop playing. Don't play it again. Life is too short to play bad games. But what's really interesting, and this will, later in the show will become apparent.
Ooh, foreshadowing.
Sometimes there are many other factors other than the game that result in a bad play experience. And I have many games that I love and cherish now. Viticulture being one of definitely in my top 10. That had I based it on one bad play experience, I would have denied myself so much pleasure in the future. Because, Because, first time I played it, I hated it, and now I really, really adore it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it took me a couple of tries to really enjoy Cosmic Encounter, and it's definitely one of my favorite games now. And it wasn't that the game experience was bad so much as it was a bit average and not interesting, not particularly engaging, until eventually I sat down, played it, and had a fantastic time. And it sort of, to use the vernacular, it clicked. But less in the sense of me adjusting my expectations and what I can get out of the game, and more that I finally understood what the game does when it works best, when it works as it's supposed to work, and I recognize this as an experience that I enjoy, that I have a great deal of fun with it. I think it's valuable, which is why I keep returning to Cosmic Encounter, which is why I enjoy it so much. But it took me a couple of tries to really wrap my head around and really understand what's going on, really understand where the game is supposed to go. I haven't had these experiences with either Game of Thrones or Space Cadets Dice Duel. Other people seem to have really taken it very badly. I mean, the classic example, of course, Game of Thrones, the betrayal moment, where somebody goes, "No, I'm not going to attack you. No, I'm not going to attack you. If you move there, I'm not going to attack you." And then they do that action, and you attack them. It's stereotypical. Basically, that led to a huge blow up between that player and me. Me being the not so nice backstabber, him being the angry backstabby. And since then, that game has never hit the table again with him as a player.
Now, my initial reaction to that is, what a fucking baby, grow up, you knew what you were getting into. That's my initial reaction.
Right.
But at the same time, you can't legislate for how you're going to react to situations all the time. And I think, essentially what you're doing when you're playing games is exercising your leisure time.
Right.
And if you fear that your leisure time is going to be ruined by doing something that you have a fairly good idea is not going to be fun to begin with, why would you sacrifice it?
no.
So I understand. And
I understand that as well. I think the point where I'm a bit disappointed is that I have seen no indication from him to work through this experience. Sort of go, right, was this me? Was this a game? Is this something that, that player will always do? So is he inherently untrustworthy and going to, ruin a good game night? Is he, was I maybe having a bad day? None of this seems to have happened. It's just become like this blank refusal of never even looking at this game again. And this, I think, is disappointing because...
No, it is disappointing, but at the same time, if you know sometimes. And especially, Game of Thrones ain't 10 minutes long.
No.
And also it might just be, in that case, self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Yes, I think this is very much the case.
I don't enjoy it. I'm not going to enjoy it. And that doesn't mean to say the guy is an asshole. All it means to say is towards this particular topic, he has a mental intransigence that he doesn't consider important enough to get over.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I think
I could be a bit catty now, which I'm going to be, which is, well, he didn't spend 50 quid on it.
Right, that's true.
But I did, and I now have a big paperweight in my shelf.
That's true, but you then, being the person who spent 50 quid, it's incumbent on you to find people who are amenable to that game.
That is true, yeah.
It's not upon him to play.
No.
And the thing is, I think about getting older is, and it's a trite statement that was said by someone in the past.
No, I can't imagine.
But it's changing the things you can change and having the grace to accept the things you can't to some degree. And I have aspects of my personality that I understand may be negative, that I attempt to subdue.
Right.
But I know in certain situations I will have certain reactions to things.
Right.
And it's not within my control necessarily. So what I do is control the situations I'm in better, that doesn't happen. You know what I mean?
But does that mean, do you think that you recognizing that you have certain character traits kills certain games for you?
No. What it does do is kill the group with which I play them.
Okay, go on.
If I know, say, I have a real annoyance with people willfully taking more time than everyone else.
Right, okay.
And there are certain people I know who, especially playing certain games, Through the Ages is one, especially towards the end of Through the Ages.
Which, as we all know, is a particularly short game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And towards the end, turns get longer. Turns don't get shorter towards the end. And there's a couple of people I know that they will take markedly more time than anyone else around the table to take their turn.
And do they apologize for that?
No, and they're not it's not malicious, it's just the way they work, and they're not conscious of what they're doing, I think, even when told. And so rather than continuing with the barracking that I give them and the frustration that I feel and the extra 45 minutes tacked on to the end of the game, whenever I arrange that game, I make sure they're not in it.
Right, yeah.
And that's the way to do it.
What was that?
Did you hear that, Georges?
That was a particularly squeaky box fart. Somebody playing a board game without us.
Was that upstairs?
There's an upstairs?
Yeah. Do you want to go and have a look?
No.
No, me neither.
Excellent.
All right, so moving on.
Good plan.
To what degree do you think overplaying a game is responsible for killing it?
I think it is possible. It's definitely possible to play out a game. So basically, you've played it so much that you've seen what it has to offer. I think we had an episode on that. That there seems to be no spark left, no desire to go back because you feel like you've seen everything. You've experienced everything this game has to offer. It's all registered, and it's not, it's not exciting enough to return to a familiar experience. Again, to bring up Cosmic Encounter, I don't feel I've played out this game because I think there are a lot of combinations there that I haven't seen, that I might never see, but I feel that the experience I get from this game kind of justifies me going back to it. Even if I end up with the same 4 or 5 alien races that we play with similar situations, I still feel this is going to be funny. It's going to be enjoyable. But I do think there are some games where at some point you go, I think I've sort of seen everything I can see. I personally can see in this game. I've done all the decisions. I've went through all the tense moments this game has to offer. They were great, they were fun, but I don't think this game is going to give me an experience that I haven't already had, and there's so many new experiences I could have instead.
And I think this leads to there's a fatuous thing that a lot of people say when it comes to replayability.
Right.
Oh, more stuff makes a game more replayable. If you get more cards in the deck, it's more replayable. And I think that's
it's a bit like saying if you put more mustard on your hot dog, it's tastier.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The point is, games have a sort of internal logic, an internal sort of machinery.
Yeah.
And just putting a new coat of paint on a crappy engine isn't going to make the engine run better. And so this idea that you add more stuff makes the game more replayable, I think is a fatuous statement, right?
Yes, generally I agree with you, but I think there are a few games out there that swap certain elements of the core engine with other ones.
Well, this is a different thing, right? So if your expansion just adds 40 new cards that do the same thing, that doesn't add to replayability, although a lot of people confuse that.
Yeah.
Whereas if it says we pull out the carburetor and replace it with a sleeker, newer one, so Orleans, for instance,
right,
changing the core of the game from a competitive to cooperative experience, using it still being recognisably Orleans, extends the life of that game, not infinitely, obviously, because that's an absurd statement, but it extends it incredibly, because you're changing the core of the game. It feels the same, but the whole emphasis of the game changes.
The experience you get is different.
Exactly.
Right. See, I was thinking of a game like Power Grid, which is essentially very similar, but the maps you play on, the slight change in rules. I haven't played any. I'm just, going by conversations I've had with others, and the fact that so many new maps seem to come out every year. It seems to suggest that swapping out a map changes it, not fundamentally, but enough to become even more replayable. That Ticket to Ride is the same way. A lot of the expansions to Ticket to Ride are basically different maps with one or two rules changes.
Yeah.
I think there's a very, very competitive map out there. I think there's a very, very soft interaction map out there. I'm sure there are small rules changes with various editions of the game. I'm not sure if this extends the game, or if this isn't just a change of having a cappuccino and a latte and a macchiato.
Also, I think it's slightly different in that I think with Ticket to Ride, sure, it's a financial consideration, blah blah blah, boring, cynical. I'm not 18 years old anymore. But also, I think it's about them trying to provide a Ticket to Ride experience for all types of players.
Right.
You know what I mean? If you're nasty and you like the blocking elements, then you can have X. If you enjoy just the pure building elements and you don't really care whether anyone else is building or not, then you can have this experience. And I think that's part of it. And I think that's probably these big games with maps. They seem to be infinitely tweakable, almost.
Tweakable, yeah, that's a good word. Yeah.
And they provide experiences for any type of player.
Well, I guess that's the idea behind it. I think that's the hope, that if you have a game that works, that is well done, you can sort of broaden your target audience by tweaking it and offering different experiences. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that's interesting.
But there are certain games, and I think social deduction games fall into this.
Right.
Because social deduction games are so easy to play.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but yeah.
The rubric with which I'm using.
Yeah, okay.
What I mean is, they're so rules light, there's very little explanation. They're sort of gettable, grokkable, and they don't tend to last a huge amount of time. And so I find, that night when I got Secret Hitler,
right, yeah,
and we played it at the games night.
Oh yeah,
and we played it 9 times in a row.
Yes, we did.
And social deduction games are kind of like this. They are games that are very easy to play out because you want to play them again and again and again, and they don't take such a mental toll. So our review game this week, after I played that, the thought of playing it again directly afterwards is just not possible because it's so mentally taxing.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas social deduction games, they're very easy to kill because they're very easy to play.
I don't know about that. I think social deduction games are strange. I'm sure I've mentioned that before, and that social deduction games hide their complexity in the dynamics of the group.
You probably won't agree with me on this, though.
Probably.
Would you agree with me that they're less mentally exhausting than something like, think of something comparable. Yeah, so, Concordia.
Right. I think they're different. I have had players in my group, actually one of them might be listening to this show, who I assume were going to have an easy time with a social deduction game, and they sat down and they played it, and they hated it. They found it completely ungrokkable, as you said. They found it so difficult to figure out what they were supposed to do, how they're supposed to play, where they're supposed to go strategically, tactically, all these kind of things. I think what makes social deduction games so accessible, and I think they are very accessible, and I agree with you on that, is that they do not seem to have a lot of rules, and they suggest lightness. They suggest not necessarily lack of depth, but at least suggest a level of you won't be left behind in this game. Not everyone's going to figure everything out and laugh at your silly mistakes, because you will feel like you're on an equal footing with everyone else, because there are just 4 rules there. You cannot obviously remember 4 rules, but in practice all these social deduction games grow this complexity from paying attention to table talk, paying attention to social interaction, hence the name. Some people have a hard time making the switch, sort of gamifying their social interaction, or even paying attention to that from a game perspective, and some do not. And I think those who do not have an incredibly easy time with social deduction games. They have a lot of fun, I think, with those deduction games because they come natural to them. They seem like games that have almost no rules to them because everything else is just so intuitively clear.
I mean, I have a friend, I was playing games with him the other night, who just refuses.
Right.
Won't play The Resistance, won't play Secret Hitler, won't play One Night Ultimate Werewolf, won't play Gooseberry, any of these games. Because he says, they just don't work, my brain does not sync with these games.
Right.
I mean, I think he's Asperger's anyway, so obviously... No, I think he's legitimately Asperger's.
Okay.
No, I think he's
all right.
diagnosed Asperger's. He said he was on the spectrum, legitimately. And so, obviously, and I'm not saying that you need to be Asperger's to not like social deduction games, that's not what I'm saying, but there are some people for whom that interaction doesn't come naturally. What I would say, though, is... in my experience, and of course I can only use my experience, but my experience is fairly extensive over sort of 5 years of playing a lot of games with a lot of different people, that the majority of people understand those interactions because they're the kind of interactions that you do in normal life. Like you said,
like you said, you're lying, cheating, backstabbing. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, you said it. They hide their complexity in that the complexity of interaction has been learnt over 18, 25, 30 years of simply living on the planet. Right.
Yes,
and they take a lot of things for granted. They assume a sort of assume a sort of median person, and that median person has these abilities.
I'm not sure. Yes, I think I know where you're coming from. I think I would draw a line in saying that it has nothing to do with your social skills per se. I think again, the person I'm thinking of right now is very skilled socially, but it's really this switch from, like I said, gamifying a social interaction,
right?
That some people have a lot of trouble with, and it took me a long time to take that step as well. It took me a long time to figure out, right, this is what I'm paying attention to, this is how I have to lie, this is why I have to lie, this is why somebody else has to lie or wants to lie, and this is how I can tell if they're lying, because this using lies tactically, strategically for something as trivial as winning a game never occurred to me before.
Well, that's really interesting, because I think the fear comes in social deduction games, and this is turned into the social deduction half hour. I think
excellent.
The fear comes in social deduction games in looking like an idiot. Not winning
that's true of all games.
Yeah, but especially in this, not winning or losing is not an issue. Looking an idiot in the sense of going for your big Hail Mary lie and just going red in the face and everyone going, come on now.
Really?
That's where the fear lies, I think. I remember once I was playing The Resistance, a very close friend of mine. She's not a gamer, but she came to one of my game parties.
Right.
And we played Resistance before, and she played it, and she was a spy. And I just looked at her and went, are you a spy? And she went, no? And of course, everyone just fucking erupted laughing, and she sort of shrunk into us. I'm like, oh my god, I can't deal with it. And she said, I love this game when I'm not a spy. I just can't deal with the stress of having to lie.
No, I think that's true. I think, I would put it less into this idea of looking like an idiot and more, well, maybe it's just a variation of the same idea. Less with, losing face in front of your peers, and more a case of breaking the game because you're letting down your team because you lie so badly.
Well, I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
No, not at all. Not at all.
What the hell is that, Georgios?
Maybe it's the upstairs, which I'm quite sure does not exist.
Vamp. I'm just going to go and have a look for 2 minutes.
This is a cabin, this is not a hotel.
Just vamp. I'll be back in 2 seconds.
Cabins do not have second floors. Ben, that's a mirror.
So I went upstairs, Georgios.
There is no upstairs.
I found this. It's a letter.
Is it the letter B?
It's written in what can only be described as effluvia, and it says.
Why would you describe it that way?
Do you want to know what this letter is?
I'm not so keen, but I probably can't stop you.
It says.
You're in my home. Leave or die.
Do you think that's just a prank, Georgios, or?
Well, you should keep in mind that die is the singular of dice. It's probably just a board gamer hiding in the cupboard.
Oh, no, you're right. I think that makes me feel a lot better now.
There you go.
Anyway, moving on, Georgios.
We should.
So, you can play games out and that may kill them, but also, I think board game companies themselves can directly kill a game.
Oh, yes, they can.
So, or it may not even be board game companies. The board game companies may be incredibly willing, but external factors. So if we take Dune as an example.
Yes.
Dune died not because there was a lack of willingness on the part of the company to publish the game, not that there was a lack of willingness on the part of the players to play the game, but there was a lack of willingness on the Herbert estate to license it out for a game again.
Yeah.
And that seems a sort of unjust death to me, where sort of a random factor dictates that the game has to die and there's nothing you can do about it. Forbidden Stars, another example.
Right. I think those are different, though, in the sense that Dune, at least, has seen two resurgences. Oh, three if you count the second-hand market. The first resurgence, obviously, was the reimplementation as Rex, which changed the setting to Twilight Imperium backstory.
Yep.
The second has come with print and play companies now offering services where you send them, or maybe they have the print and play files, and then you pay them to give you very, very nice looking version of the game of those print and play files based on files that fans of the game have made available online. So I do know, I've seen some of them have popped up on my Twitter feed, people who've bought a specialized Dune edition. It's not an official game, it's not licensed or anything. It's more or less a copy shop that, well, no, copy shop seems to be demeaning. No, it's a company that specializes in creating individual copies of games. Like one copy that you can buy for yourself. And you say, I don't know how much variety you have, but the pictures I've seen are very, very good looking.
Are there any requisites? I mean, the games have to be out of print and unavailable, right?
I think the requisite is they need to have the print and play files.
You can't go to, I don't know, this company and say, I'd like a singular copy of Scythe, please.
I assume they do not have the print and play files for that. So if...
Well, it's also to do with the copyright thing, isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
So did you see the My Little Pony Scythe?
Yeah. I'm actually tempted to think about maybe organising a game for that in a couple of years.
And credit to Jamie Stegmaier. He was I think overjoyed at it. But this,
amazing.
This is where the law sits, especially in America. I don't know about the rest of the world, but in America, you can't copyright mechanics. You can only copyright theme and setting. So if someone were to make a copy of Scythe that's the same as the current Scythe, Jacob Rosalski's world is copyrighted.
Yeah.
But you can reskin it with My Little Pony. They did it with that Bang game. Some Chinese company made a copy of Bang. It's exactly the same, just with a different skin on it. That's legal.
Yeah, I guess.
And so that's the way it works. I guess this is how these companies can get away with doing these kinds of things.
Well, probably, but I mean, I think you'd be hard pressed to argue for noticeable financial loss on anyone in this. I mean, it vaguely reminds me of the abandonware issues when it comes to software of games that came out in the 80s, 90s, or in the early 2000s that are simply not available anymore. Before online shops like Good Old Games or even Steam came out with these, they made older games, out of print games, if you call them that, available again to this new generation of gamers with new technology. There was a time where certain games were just impossible to get. There was no stock left anywhere. You might be lucky finding a single dusted copy in a PC shop that's about to close down somewhere in the back bin. Again, it's always been this gray area, and I've never really looked into it deeply to know if the legality of this has fundamentally changed, but there's always seems to... I remember there being a sort of gesture of, as soon as any of the rights holders talk to us, we'll take it off our site. Until they do that, here's the game you enjoyed when you were 10, 12, however old you were. Have fun. You can't buy it. If you can buy it anywhere, we'll provide a link, and go there and buy it, but we'll not offer it for free. Stuff like that. And that seems very fair. It seems to be very sensible and decent. And who knows, maybe board games will eventually reach a similar stage where you can just, where you have sites that offer print and play files for long out of print games that are no longer available, that nobody is willing to publish anymore. And if you're willing to pay the money to get your individual copy, that's fine.
Well, I think it depends on the contracts that are signed, right? If the design of the game lies with the designer,
right,
they just license the design to a company for X amount of years. And this is why games change hands. A lot of Knizia games have changed publishers many times.
They're apparently now, I think by last count, there are about as many copies of modern art, different versions of modern art available at Essen as there are booths.
Incredible. There will always be a statute of limitations because you have, I think it's 75 years after the author dies.
The Mickey Mouse laws, yeah.
Yeah, then they become public domain. So games will always be public domain at some point, you assume.
Well,
but that takes a long time.
Depends on how much money Disney is willing to pay their lawyers.
But can you think of a game that you've played that the company have just stopped supporting it, they've killed it, and you've still had a desire to play it?
Well, generally, LCGs are obvious examples. The moment where a living card game, stops being supported, it ceases to be a living card game and becomes a paperweight. So I'm not...
See, that amazes me, right? So you have these games that have huge amounts of content. 50, 60 times more content than a normal game you buy would have. And because of the sales method, as soon as they stop producing cards, people's attitudes are, well, this is pointless now. This is just a paperweight. Yet you have so much stuff. So if they stop producing Netrunner tomorrow...
Yeah, like they kind of did, and then they restarted.
There's so much Netrunner stuff that you can legitimately play that game for ages and not really worry. The game is complete, but the expectation is that it's constantly refreshing and constantly being newified.
But I think the important term here is this feeling of completeness.
Right.
Because these living card games do not feel complete. They feel, or these trading card games generally are always about refining and getting the best perfect deck together that's more or less unbeatable. And with every new expansion that comes out, every new deck of cards that comes out, there are new options there that might provide a better, that might give you the option of having a more perfect deck. So this is what it comes down to. It's this idea that these games are never they are complete basically the moment you find the perfect deck. And as soon as a new expansion comes out, your deck might not be perfect anymore, and you need to try again.
And things like power creep and faction focus and things like this mean that they constantly have to be refined. Because they're constantly being refined, they constantly have to be refined. They're the sharks of the game world, aren't they? If they don't stop moving, they die.
Yes, if they... basically, yeah. Okay, one of the reasons why I stopped playing Netrunner, which I never really played enough as much as I wanted to, was I felt that I had a more or less complete set. I never played enough Netrunner games to feel like, right, I'm on the top of I'm sort of on top of it. I know what the best decks are, what they look like, and how to put them together and how to play them, so I'm fine. And as soon as a new game, new expansion comes out, I have to go, oh no, my favorite strategy doesn't work anymore. I have a bunch of cards. I hope at some point to sort of lure someone in to play Netrunner regularly with me, because again, I want to use those cards somewhat in some capacity. But yeah, I think trading card games, living card games, those are obviously victims. But again, this feeling of completeness, it seems to me that most games that are not living card games or something similar are supposed to feel complete out of the box. You never feel like you need an extension so that you now have the complete experiences. The whole experience. There have been cases, and I think you mentioned viticulture earlier, where one expansion changed the experience of the game so fundamentally for you that it now felt complete, that it now felt like the game that you want to play, that you want to return to. But I think those cases are the exception and not the rule. For the most part, these base games are supposed to be complete. They're supposed to provide enough enjoyment, enough gameplay to feel like you've made a worthwhile investment.
And the thing is, like it or not, and sometimes I don't, games production is a business predicated on selling product to get money to continue to be able to create product to sell money. I don't like calling games products. It seems quite sterile and financially motivated. It makes me feel uncomfortable because they're much more to me than products, especially when they're good. They generate an experience that quantifying it as a product makes me feel undersells it somewhat. But the fact is, very few game companies will do things purely out of admiration for the thing that they have. So they might have a game that is absolutely fantastic, no one really likes. They have absolute faith in it. They absolutely think the game is wonderful. They're not going to continue to support it because it doesn't sell. And I think that's unfortunate.
Oh yeah.
And I think gaming hasn't developed as much of an art form as other forms of art have, and so therefore is still in the hands of private people. And it will truly have arrived as a art form when it starts to get public support and games can be made merely to be games, not to be products.
I don't know. I think if you look at other art forms, established art forms, they follow the same demands.
They do.
Look at film, look at literature, look at theatre,
But
music.
I watched a movie last night.
Right.
And when the first credits came up, there were just 2 credit screens funded by the Swedish National Film Board, funded by the Dutch National Film Board, funded by the German National Film Board, right? So the director of the movie, the producer of the movie, had got state funding from a number of European countries, and it was a big co-production.
Right.
And this was a film that was, I don't think willfully non-commercial, but non-commercial. The story it told is not something Hollywood would do. The way it handled the story as well, whilst being incredibly original, incredibly human, incredibly realistic, was utterly at odds with the narrative structure and expectation that Hollywood demands of its films. That film would not have been made unless there were state organisations to fund it, because the state organisations fundamentally aren't interested in profitability, they're interested in the art. If it had just been a purely private venture, the film wouldn't have been made. And it's the same. And games is in its infancy, especially being recognised as something valuable and worthwhile.
Right.
And until we have, and it may never happen, but until we have sort of government-controlled bodies that are able to allocate funds to allow people to work, to develop, and to make games that are purely about games and not about profitability, then it won't have fully matured as an art.
Well, I think there are 2 points. I think one, a friend of mine is a scriptwriter, and he was part of a German production. He's now produced. He's one of the writers of a German Netflix show now. And I've had conversations with him about when he was still struggling to find an in into the industry, about these arguments about how he would apply for money from the state for films. From his conversations, I seem to recall that this clear distinction that you've put up isn't quite mirrored by reality. I think
no, for sure.
I think
for sure, I was speaking idealistically.
Yeah, but I think private people there are just as many, well, not just as many, but there are private investors who are interested in funding the art of film, as there are private investors who are interested in funding their bank account. And the same is true for the states funds. There are just as many who put up this level of, no, we want something that's socially relevant, that's important, that's culturally relevant, but we also don't want to, throw money out of the window. I think these impulses are there no matter whether you're a private person or or working for the state. I think the difference might be in the percentage.
But you're just much more likely to see a film that is innovative and challenging in Europe being made by filmmakers who are getting their funding from the state, as you are from people who are funded by Warner Brothers. This is why Hollywood is essentially. This is why Marvel movies are so popular, because they're just money generators, utterly generic, utterly cookie cutter. For me personally, utterly vacuous with very little artistic merit, and yet they make a load of money, and that's why they're being made.
Just to add up to this, the last point I want to make, I think you have to also sort of take into account that accessibility and profitability is only possible because of accessibility. And accessibility is an essential element of any valuable art form, I think.
It depends. Anyway, this is for definitely a different podcast, let alone a different show. So anyway, I was going... I'm gonna go and investigate this, Georgios.
Yeah, I think they might. See, I thought they were playing Jenga, but they would have, fallen down by now.
All right. Just. Anyway, I'm gonna go and check. I'll be back in a minute.
Yeah, I'll whistle while you pee.
Oh, hi. How long have you been here? Why didn't you come down? Of course I'll come in.
Ben, there's no upstairs. It's a cabin. Ben, there is no upstairs. You've probably walked into the cupboard. Ben? Ben?
Roll up for the raffle. Give those prizes. Make those children scream. Get some candy floss and lick a toffee apple, Georgios.
Yes, also send out apologies because this is the first and maybe not. It's probably going to be the last raffle for a while.
Okay, we offered this raffle thing and we're sending people games, and then we realised all the money you pledge to us on Patreon will probably get eaten up with postage to sending games to the far-flung corners of the world. And I love the fact that we have an international listenership.
Yes.
But, so...
Well, to be fair, it's definitely more costly to send out individual or even pack of games all over the world, so we will need to rethink the numbers on that. And if we manage to get the numbers into a realm, into a sort of range where we can feel like we haven't wasted an entire months of Patreon money just on, sending games across the world, we will definitely revisit the raffle. But until then, you get games this time.
And we would like you to send in ideas for pledges you'd like, things you'd like us to do, things you'd like us to see.
No nudes. Oh, well, not from me.
I'm willing to send you nudes. I've got a lot of them, Georgios. My previous employment required me to print out a lot of nude pictures of myself, and I've just got them under the bed. And it's quite unsettling, lying over 7,000 copies of me with my dangly out.
Thank you for that image.
Anyway, Georgios, let's move on to the winners. Away from the caveats, into the world of success.
Yes. What the world of success? What does that look like?
I wouldn't know, Georgios. I've never been there.
All right. Okay. Do they have like limousines and stuff?
That's what I assume.
Oh,
Usher
that sounds fancy.
has one, doesn't he?
I thought that was his job.
He probably is, because he was big in the 90s. Probably is a limo driver now. Anyway, Georgios, let's go on. Who's winner number one?
Winner number one, we've actually met.
Yeah, so just before you do shenanigans, we put this in a spreadsheet, and then we use a random number generator to sort out who's going to win. There's no preferential treatment. If you're a Patreon backer, you get a
ticket.
Exactly. So anyway, back to where we were.
Yes, and you'll cut out the part where I say we picked them on whether we like them or not.
That's I'll cut that out, yes.
Excellent. You do that. Winner number one, who we've met, is... again, I'm struggling with names. Let's try and hope I do not start an international incident, but then recent politics and Twitter shows us it's impossible to start an international incident. Karine Zyman, all the way in lovely South Africa. And I have the second winner, Will Brasher, all the way from Brexit Britain. Hopefully not, because then we'll never see him again. And of course, followed by Mike Poole, who I've seen in person, or he has seen me first, but the point stands.
And I will see him next week.
Yes. Well, I won't.
No, he said after that first time, he got too hot under the collar and he can't handle that level of tumescence in a public place, Georgios.
That's fair. That's very humble of him, but yeah, I respect that, yeah.
And our final winner, all the way in the snowy reaches of...
Snowy?
I assume it's a Viking country, Georgios.
Well, I guess,
The
yes.
snowy reaches of Denmark, where the elks run free and the mead flows like waterfalls.
They're Danes. They're not Vikings. It's not quite the
Same
same.
bloody thing, innit?
You have to explain to him when you see him.
Joel Peterson. So what we'd like you to do is we'll put up a thread saying competition winners get in touch with us thread. And we'd like you to comment on the thread telling us that you know that you've won, and then we'll contact you individually and sort out how we hand over these games.
Yes, I think basically if you are in Essen, that's probably the easiest. You can take home a bunch of games that we'll give you in Essen, in person. And you can look at us funny as to why we give them to you, but we will not answer because that's just how we roll.
And Kareen will make sure you get them down in sunny South Africa. Anyway, Georgios, I'm feeling so mellifluously generous that I'm going to go outside now and give some stray cats some meat.
Yeah, you should massage them or something.
Is that your name on the list? Well, get in there then. Get to the bar and get buckled. Welcome to the guild.
Oh, Georgios,
Yes?
you must be nervous.
Why would I be nervous?
Costas and the Bazookas playing the guild's annual Halloween ball.
Oh, people are going to be so drunk when we do it. It's not going to be an issue.
And they-
Actually, I talked to both of them. Did you know? See, I believed you in when you said they were called Tension and Release.
They
but
told me they were called Tension and Release.
yeah, apparently they're not. They actually have names, given names by people to them.
I don't believe it.
Though it's true.
All right, what's their bloody names then?
Denny and Steve.
They're called Danny and Steve.
Yeah, I know.
Would you mind if I just called them Tension and Release?
No, that's fine, but they are called Denny and Steve.
Anyway, but it's very exciting that you're playing tonight. I hear from Tension, Danny, that you've worked out this long Halloween-based playlist, the Ballroom Blitz, Monster in My Pocket,
I'm quite certain those are games.
Eating My Apple, It's Bleeding from My Apple, was the song I suggested to Release, Steve, that you play. And he said, do you know what he said?
Did he say no?
I'll think about it, Ben, he said. Which I assume to mean yes.
Yes, that's basically what I mean when I say think about it. I'm still thinking about the suggestion of just, not, dressing up for Halloween. And
You helm the band, right?
I stand in front of a microphone. Yes.
So you've got to learn the song, because if you're going to play it, I mean, obviously you seem very amenable to this. So, I bite into my apple is bleeding, it's a bloody apple. Go on then.
I think about this.
Wow, you just sounded just like Tension Release when you said that.
I know.
Anyway, Georgios, what was the guilty question last time?
Well, the question was fitting for Valentine's Day, which... Wait, is this not Valentine's Day?
No, it's the sexier one. It's Halloween, Georgios.
Oh, it's the day before Valentine's Day.
Exactly.
Right. The question was, what makes you fall in love with a game, and what was the last game you fell in love with? Actually, interestingly enough, the last game I fell in love with, or at least heavily infatuated with, is today's review game.
The last game, Georgios, I fell in love with that gave me that post-game glow
Right.
and left my fingers tingly
Right.
was the game we're reviewing this week.
Interesting. Are you going to get in trouble with Janine later? Because I mean, maybe she thinks game is just a pseudonym for a woman.
No. Firstly, she knows that she's the only woman ever for me, and I would know. I mean, frankly, if you're talking about out of my league, you know what I mean?
Right.
So, I mean, there's no chance that I'm going to try and mess that up. I mean, I might mess it up with my ludicrously abhorrent personality and, things like that, but certainly not looking at another woman. She's the only woman that comes into my purview, and especially around Halloween.
Is it really pronounced purview?
I purview.
Purview. You perv you.
I perv her quite extensively, but I'm allowed to, Georgios, because we're in a consensual, loving engagement.
All right.
Georgios.
Oh, I'm in an engagement as well.
Costas and the Bazookas.
There you go.
And you're getting all the money and all the black and orange test tube cocktails you can drink for the freeze.
Yeah, I just let them cash me out, basically. I don't drink.
Yeah, but tension and release, woo, they put it away. Well, especially when I was in the band,
Yes.
they seem to really increase with the drinking. I think it's because I'm such a good time Charlie.
That must be it, yeah. I mean, I have heard that, alcohol blindness is no longer a thing with them.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
They seem actually a lot. What's the word I would use to describe them since I
Sober?
left the band? Happier would be the word I would use.
I think it's the music, basically. I mean, Greek music is just... Some of the Greek music is quite uplifting.
Absolutely, you drop the plates and everything. I mean, it's. I mean, I was pretty resentful,
Right.
when you usurped my position in tension and release, and then
I
completely
wouldn't-
remodeled them.
I wouldn't say usurped.
But after your show at
I
my
would call it backstabbing.
right,
Right.
but after your show at the engagement party, Georgios.
You were drunk the whole time.
Oh, but you cannot understand how much vim and lead it put into mine and Janine's collective pencils for that evening's amours. It was amazing.
You should throw that, I understand that she gave you, toilet paper, a thesaurus toilet
Word of the
paper.
day, Georgios.
Yes, word of my butt, but yeah.
Spank was today's, which coincidentally was what I was doing. So what does Mr. Octavius say, Georgie?
Mr. Octavius, who has a very, commendable Mega Man avatar,
He is a Mega Man.
okay, mentions innovation and elegance. If a game is just iteration on a mechanic I've seen a dozen times before, it's not going to excite me. It has to bring something new to the table that I've never seen before, which is interesting.
Do you agree with him? Is innovation a finite resource, I guess is the question.
No.
Can everything be innovative? Can you endlessly innovate? Or will you get to a point where you just hit a wall and you can no longer go any further?
Maybe. I think I agree in the sense that a game, I wouldn't use the word innovation necessarily, but I would use the word surprise. It should be something unexpected. It doesn't have to be necessarily something that I've never seen before, but it should be something that I cannot necessarily predict. And specifically in how it plays out on the table and in the kind of experience it generates and the kind of maybe conversation, the kind of reactions it sort of pulls out of people. That's something that I can agree with. This is the kind of, in the larger sense, innovation, change, surprises that draw me to games as well. I'm not sure it's an important factor. I just don't know. I haven't really thought about it in this sense. Maybe it is.
Sort of a couple of years ago. So I've sort of absolutely hopped on board all of the sort of recent innovations. I love legacy games.
Right.
When app games come out, I pre-ordered XCOM, I bought Alchemist. I love all that sort of innovation, but also it's not a prerequisite for me. Mm-hmm. If you look at my list, if you go to YouTube, the Perfect Information channel, we have a list of our top 10 anticipated games from Spiel 2017. And if you look at that
Nice
list...
plug. Well
Thanks,
done, well
thanks.
done.
I even put on my my DJ voice for that.
Yeah, DJ voice.
Hi, you're listening to Ben FM. Now, on the turntables, you have My Apple's Bloody, Eat It, by Ben. You see, that's my radio voice. But, so if you look at...
Apple's bloody eat it.
It's a great song, you should sing it at the show.
Well,
anyway,
we might actually. People will be drunk enough.
so if you look at my top 10 list, a lot of the games that are on that list is not because they're innovative. It's because they're familiar and they're cozy and they make me interested in them simply because I kind of know what I'm getting. A Uwe Rosenberg game, Kiesling game, these big heavy Euros that are probably going to be dancing around a particular set of mechanics and feeling very similar to a lot of others in their ilk. That familiarity, it's the same way when people go on holiday, the first thing they do is go into Starbucks, right? Because familiarity is comfortable. And it's not just innovation what I look for. Actually, in the far bulk of games that I like to play and like to buy, it's the familiarity that draws me to them, not the innovation.
Yeah, I can see familiarity sort of going hand in hand with accessibility. Something that you're somewhat familiar with that doesn't change things fundamentally. That's a huge leap away from what you're what you're comfortable with is easier to get into than a game that asks you to do things completely differently.
Right.
It asks you to sort of. I remember when I was 6, 7, or 8 when a game was being advertised on TV over and over again, with being so crazy, so wild, so unexpected, so out of the box. Basically, it was a roll and move game where you're supposed to lose all your money, and people just couldn't get their heads around. It's a really, really stupid game.
And when you look at innovation too, often
Is that a sequel?
Exactly. Often the outliers, the vanguard, often this is in all sort of genres, often the first people to do things, what they produce will not be fully realised because it's new and it's innovative. It might not function perfectly well. The idea is wonderful, but it might not function perfectly well on the first or second or even third attempt. It's only when that gets codified. So Bag Builder, for instance,
Right.
like the sort of first pass was Hyperborea, which is fine and interesting. You know, turning deck building into bag building is interesting, but it didn't quite work. Whereas it was then refined by Orléans, which is just a much better iteration by bringing in other familiar things that we can grasp onto. It's that Jeff Engelstein rule about if you're going to introduce a new mechanic into a game, only introduce one mechanic.
Right.
Because people's cognitive abilities can only deal with one new thing.
Maybe. I think I'm reminded of I've played Vast recently, and our Patreon backers will get an update on that at some point this month. I noticed similar tension between the familiarity of individual elements and the innovation of creating a game that's all about asymmetrical gameplay. It's all about, somebody else said to us, I think it was, I'm not going to name drop them, but somebody else mentioned to us that there's no actual game there. It's just individual rule elements that each player takes on, and it's the combination of those rules elements that creates the game.
There's nothing in the centre. There's no heart to it. And it's only the interaction between these separate limbs that make the game work. And what amazes me is the game works.
Yes, but, and again, this is something that I keep realizing about this game. It's really, I find it's a real stumbling block with my gaming group. Just how, not inaccessible, just how much it asks of you as a player to really figure it out, to really get into it, to really play it in a way that you feel like, all right, this is what the game is supposed to be.
You've got to love it to invest in it.
Yeah, I think there's a big hurdle, and I can maybe it proves the rule. Maybe this new version, this new iteration, this new expansion, this new I think the Mena, I believe it's called currently. Maybe this will not improve, but will reach this golden snitch, Harry Potter reference, of making the core idea more accessible to more gamers, to find an easier path to get to the gaming goodness that lies buried within the game design.
So Penny Schechter,
we haven't talked about elegance, have we? Just really quickly, I think elegance, I agree far more with elegance than innovation. I think elegance is amazing. It makes me love a game.
I'm going to play The Colonist this afternoon. That's what I think about elegance.
Well, I love TI3, that's what I think about elegance, but it doesn't change the fact that elegance can be a huge factor in me loving a game.
So Penny Schechter?
Yes, PD!
What does he say?
Who is now a published game author.
He's a published game author.
Which
is that like a Dementor from Harry Potter? They suck up the souls of authors.
No. Well, yes, they suck up the souls of all the people who don't like their games.
Right. So he's an author. Penny Schechter.
Yes, he's now an author, and he's going to be in Essen. We're probably going to run into him, and I'm going to have to justify that joke to him. He says, the thing that makes me fall in love with a game is the promise that the next game will give me more exciting experiences. They can be similar to former ones or different in nature. What do you think?
Well, it seems to me that that's what makes you fall in love with a game. It's that, and everyone who talks about these same things, and I think that's what he means. It's that thing of you finish the game and you go, God, if I'd just done that would have happened. God, if I'd have just had one more turn, that game would have been perfect. God, if I'd have just realised early in the game, if I leverage this, then this will happen. And it happens in within games and then after games. So I was playing a game the other night, the game we're going to review later.
Should we name it at some point, or are we just going to coyly...
We'll name it in the review, hopefully.
Wow.
That would be rather negligent not to.
Yes.
But
it's poker, isn't it?
Exactly. But it's that thing of when it's not your turn, you're thinking, God, I can't wait for my turn because I'm going to do something cool on my turn. And what he's talking about is the same thing, but after the game's finished, going, oh God, I can't wait to play that game again because what I'm going to do in the next play of that game is just going to be even more amazing than this one. And that promotes love, the desire to get better, to work the game better, whether that be in a sort of efficiency Euro way or whether that just be experiencing the story in a better way. That desire to want to play it again and again and again, and the game offering you room for improvement, whatever that nebulous term means. That's the essence of loving a game, I think.
Interesting. I see where you're coming from. I personally don't quite experience it that way. It's the desire to improve isn't a big factor in me loving a game.
Now, you have to bear in mind there's inverted commas around the word improve.
Well, yeah,
I don't just mean score more points,
No.
be more efficient, whatever. Just improve in the sense of increase your satisfaction at the experience is what I mean, I guess.
All right. Well, I would at least differentiate between. I think there are quite a few people who love getting better at games, who love play a game and realize, oh, I can improve, I can learn this game better. I
also mean that when I say improve too.
Yeah, I mean, but that's basically the part where yes, I recognize that's there. It doesn't ring particularly true for me.
Right.
I mean, of course, I enjoy getting better at a game, but it's not. In my memory, at least, it's never been a driving force for me wanting to play a game. I do think, when I compare it to my experience, games I really liked were games that allowed me. They gave me more room to explore, to find new things, to not necessarily better, but just new, different.
And you don't mean literally explore, as in turn over extra tiles,
No.
open boxes.
No, but exploring basically and I'm going to be very fancy now. The decision space.
You know, I love the way when you're going to be fancy, you just completely mangle the pronunciation of the term you're using.
Well, decision space.
A wonderful use of self-deprecation, Georgios, to make yourself sound more humble than you actually are.
Yes, humble is that. No, what? No, doesn't matter. It's one of these jokes that go nowhere. Yeah, humility is one of the jokes that go nowhere. That's a nice line. Anyway, that's often been a driving force in me wanting to get back to a game after I've played it. It's not I want to get better, but I want to see more of it. I want to see more of what's possible. I want to see more surprises. I want to see more plot twists in the sense of, more things changing as we play, not necessarily storytelling thing. Those things make me come back to a game, with a certain enthusiasm. On the other hand, though, feeling like I'm just not being. I don't know. It's hard to put it into words. It's not that I don't care about improving, because I do care about when I play a game and I feel like I'm just going to be bad at it. I don't want to play it.
Right, for sure.
But I'm not sure that's the same as I want to play it because I can get better at it.
You have to. It's the same with sort of any game you play.
Right.
Tennis is crap until you've reached a certain level where you're able to sort of regularly get the ball over the net so you can actually experience the game.
That's an interesting observation, though, because that thing you just described is basically how I approach every game, where I want to be good enough to understand what my decisions are supposed to be. And it's usually that's my threshold before I'm willing to review a game. I want to be good enough at it, or at least I want to understand what my decisions are supposed to be, where I'm supposed to go, what I'm supposed to think, and then I can sort of speak meaningfully about this game.
That's the point. And
sometimes it's 2 games, sometimes it's 20, and sometimes it's 1.
And that's the thing. You need to get to a certain level where you can actually work within it, so it's enjoyable. You can actually pull the levers that need to be pulled.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just go, I don't know what I'm doing. And I get to that point where if I get to that point, that's cool. Mm-hmm. Becoming a grandmaster from that point on is not an issue for me.
Yeah.
And then you get to the point, like you can use the tennis analogy again. Then it's great fun if you're playing with someone who's generally at your level. Mm-hmm. But if I was to play against Roger Federer, neither of us would have any fun, because it would be just a complete promenade for him, and it would become totally impossible for me. And so it's that finding a level within the game where all of you sit on a level where you feel you're competing against each other in a competitive game, I think.
Yeah, that's probably true, yeah.
So I think kind of your difficulty to grasp, to define what you mean, I think leads us nicely onto Brian Girding when he says, I love games with depth, but love Sentinels of the Multiverse. I love games with good ties to theme, but Concordia was in my top 5. I love games that promise strategy and tactics, but consider Galaxy Trucker to be great fun. And I think generally what he's saying here is that it can be very difficult to define why you love a game, right?
Yes, I think in the grander point that he might not be intentionally making, but I think is very true, is that you can't define what you will like before you play it.
Absolutely. You can't legislate. You can't legislate for love. You just can't.
even for fun, yeah. I think it's something I do notice with a lot of gamers, and I'm not going to say I'm above it, but I'm very consciously aware. I try to be consciously aware when I do fall into that trap. The idea of, this is that kind of game, I'm not going to like it. I think in recent years, I think I've gotten quite a handle on this impulse to go, no, I'm not going to like it because of this kind of game. Or maybe I've just shifted it to, I'm never going to play it because of my groups, therefore I'm not going to look into that game.
Well, I think there's a certain element, and we all do this, especially when we first get into a hobby, right, and then we find our feet. You say, okay, I identify as this, because it's something for you to grab onto. Yeah, right. I know where I live within this thing now. Mm-hmm. And part of asserting what you like is asserting what you don't, right?
It often happens at the same time. Yeah.
Until you realise, okay, but this... So for me... I generally am a Eurogamer. Mm-hmm. They're the games I like. But I know that occasionally I can stray into other areas and I will like them equally as much. But if I'm going to try and bet, if you want me to bet on something, Nussfjord by Uwe Rosenberg, for me, is a safer bet than a Flying Frog game, for instance. It's not, It doesn't mean to say I won't like a Flying Frog game, but I'm sure that I'll like a Uwe Rosenberg than I will a Flying Frog, right?
Yeah, maybe. But then again, I think, wasn't there like a... Because I'm looking at it now, maybe I'm confusing it. Was it Hengist or was it Trambahn that you weren't that happy about?
Well, Hengist is a bag of shit.
Right.
And so, of course, that bet... It's betting, so it's not always going to come off. Yeah,
exactly.
Of course.
This is basically the point I'm trying to make. I think one thing I do notice occasionally that people seem to... I mean, I do that as well, running up to Essen when we're now going through 1,000 games. You just have to go, right, I probably won't like this kid's game. I mean, I ended up liking Rhino Hero like a lot of people did, but that's a pure kids game, and still, it can be fun. But if you're sifting through 1,000 games, you need to have some sort of
handle on what you love.
Yeah, well, basically just a reason to remove certain games from the list you're going to check out, because anything else is unfeasible. I'm sure I'm missing out on 10, 20, 30 great games this year because I thought I probably won't like this. But I mean, there are 1,000 out there just this year. I think I'll manage. But the point I was trying to make is basically that, and the point I try to teach myself is that to not assume that you do not like entire genres just because you haven't found a game in that genre that you honestly enjoy.
Right.
I'm sure that the friend I mentioned earlier who does not like social deduction games, maybe there is a social deduction game that he will really, really like.
Guaranteed.
And so I think it helps to keep an open mind, hippy-dippy that I am.
So I'm very excited about Janine coming. She hasn't revealed her Halloween costume to me, and I'm hoping for a sexy fawn, Georgios. But also, I'd like to, I think on this Halloween, this All Hallows Eve, Georgios, I'd like to finally bury the hatchet.
With whom?
Steve and Danny. It was quite acrimonious. When we split. So, if you could just tell them there's no bad feelings on my part. Happy Halloween, and I look forward to their gig tonight.
Yeah, they're dressing up as Ben for some reason.
Well, I'm highly scary, especially.
Well, you should see their costumes first. I mean, it's maybe keep the hatchet unburied for now.
Say goodnight, Georgios.
Yeah, no, I need to have a conversation with Steve and Danny. I'll be right back.
I'm Nick Mariner, and this is the Board Game Professor. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It's good to be back. I'm going to do something a little bit different this week, and I think it might actually be a little bit of a shorter segment. Who the hell knows? But I'm not exactly going to talk about a game specifically and then a theory. I'm going to talk a little bit about some social theory, but I'd like to talk, instead of in comparison to a board game, I'd like to address a little bit of our hobby, and some of the things going on in our hobby, especially something that's been going on this week in particular that I've seen online, on Twitter, on BGG, and I've talked about it a little bit on this show before, last year sometime, but it is an upsetting enough thing that I feel like we can talk about it again. We need to talk about it again, and there is a little bit of social critique that I can offer to help us get more to the bottom of some of the conversations we're having in this hobby. I would like to talk about the concept of meritocracy in particular, because I saw this word pop up, or some version of this explanation pop up online this week, and I found it so upsetting that I thought, I'm going to write this down. I have a podcast where I get to talk about this stuff. I'm going to talk about this stuff on the podcast. If you are not aware of the scuttlebutt, our dear friend in the hobby, Suzanne, who contributes to the Dice Tower, she's got her great segments on game apps and games in particular. That's what I really like her work for. She's one of the best voices in the hobby for reviewing board game apps, and I have an iPad stock full of board game apps, and so I really enjoy her work and what she contributes. She and some other female contributors recently have found themselves the target of direct and unnecessary trolling online, where she essentially published some of her statistics to show across the board, anything the Dice Tower put on YouTube, for instance, that had her as a contributor, got a spike in negative reviews. And to the point where people were harassing her online. They've been harassing her online for a long time now, because trolls are trolls. And that's what they do for some reason. And not for some reason. I know exactly the reason. They're sexist assholes. That's what misogyny is. You don't just not like women. You go out of your way to make women uncomfortable and make it difficult for them to exist in a thing that you want to be male dominated. That's what misogyny is. It's not just keeping women not liking women. Anyway, so she's been talking about this online, and of course the response is any number of bullshit excuses. But the number one thing that I've seen, the response that I've seen from people who are trying to speak back to this, is that her content isn't good enough. That this is a democratic, meritocratic system where everybody gets to put their stuff online, and whoever is the very best rises to the top. The word for that is meritocracy. That the thing that dictates success is your own merit and nothing else. Your ability to succeed, to be good, to be skilled, to be the best. We talk about our school system this way, and I have to deal with this in the field of education constantly. When I was teaching college education classes, this was a concept we dealt with frequently, and there are all sorts of scholars, Henry Giroux, Peter McLaren, some of these names, we don't really need to go far into, that have had a pretty solid critique of meritocracy for a long time. But it is a concept that extends beyond education. It's the way we talk about our society. We talk about a democracy. We talk about it here in the United States, but I think it's pretty true in a lot of Western countries. It's talked about in this way, that everybody has the same shot. It's an equal opportunity And whatever you make with that is due entirely to your own effort and your own skill, and nothing more. And what we know is that is complete and total bullshit. It is mythical. And it is not a lived reality. So the critique of meritocracy is to say that, yes, we all have to put in effort. We all have to put in, and we do need to try our best to put out good product or study for our exams, or, in the case of what we're talking about, you can't just put garbage online and expect everybody to like it and demand that they like it through some other virtue than your own ability. But there are 1,000 other social factors contributing to whether or not a person succeeds or doesn't succeed, that have nothing to do with effort and ability. So for instance, in schools, since that's what I was just talking about, you could have the sharpest kid in the world. You could have a very smart and capable kid. But I just started teaching at a high school, and I got hired to teach there because every social studies class in the building had almost 40 students in it. That's too many kids. And you can have an incredibly capable and sharp kid in that class, student in that class, but when he's one of 40 for a teacher who doesn't even have enough desks or textbooks to teach him, like, at some point you're going to hit a roadblock of access. And his particular capability has nothing to do with that. What he might eventually get on an SAT has nothing to do with his intelligence. It had everything to do with, could his school support his education? So let's talk about then YouTube, like content, board game content, and how meritocracy is a fallacious way to go about thinking about this particular topic, or the way that our female contributors are getting disproportionately targeted with negative responses. It is not because their content is inferior. That is preposterous. It is not because they're just not performing at a high enough level. As I just said, Suzanne in particular, her contributions, especially when it comes to board game apps, are invaluable for me because I'm constantly downloading and paying like $6 an app for games, and her voice is the one that I want to listen to tell me whether or not it is worth my Race for the Galaxy or something like that was worth my $6. Totally was, by the way. Through the Ages app is astounding. If you have not yet played it, find me on there. I have The Good Mariner or I Call Yellow. I'm on both screen names. I have several games going at once. Please play me at that game. Not what I came on here to talk about. And now look what's happened. You got me talking about Through the Ages. Listener who is passively soaking in this one-sided conversation and not really guiding anything I say at all. Oh, hell, what was I talking about? Yes, so content creation and board game media, we cannot presume is purely a meritocratic system. The thing about this response that if you don't want negative response, or if you don't want to be sort of targeted, you need to be better. The thing about the internet, if you haven't figured it out yet, it is a sinkhole, wasteland, abyss where everyone can put everything on at all times. The thing about diversity, the people who speak back to diversity, the people who speak back to equity or social equity, treat all of these conversations as if they are a zero-sum game, that there are only so many slots for YouTube reviewers to exist, and only the best can have one. That's not how the internet works. Everyone can have a show on the internet. Everyone can have a show on the internet. The only thing you need to be a content creator online is to have an internet access and an email address. After that, you can do anything. Everyone gets to participate in the internet. So it is a false claim to assume that we have to weed out the worst of us because there's only so much space for content. There is unlimited space for content. So to presume that the content creators online need to be held to some standard where you go out of your way to negatively target female contributors in particular, or any contributor whatsoever, that is a false narrative that we are that everybody's existing on their own merit, and we have to sort of only give our time to the best possible product, because that's not the way the internet works. My daughter watches videos of some lady like playing with pool floaties in a Target, and it's got a 1.5 million views. Like, what the fuck? Like, you could do anything online and become, I don't know, famous isn't the word, but certainly known. Certainly it becomes a sustainable product for some reason. I don't know. But when people say, and this is the point I wanted to make, when people hide behind the notion of meritocracy to explain away and to excuse this kind of behavior, they are using it as a shield to protect from the actual thing they want to say, which is they are fine with the status quo. They are fine with the dynamic of power as it exists. They are choosing to protect power as it currently exists, which is in the hands still in our society predominantly of white men of a particular economic stability, mostly straight, etc. Right? So I'm not going to allow women into my hobby. I'm not going to allow LGBTQ voices into our hobby. I'm not going to allow people of color to rise to the top of this hobby. And I will go out of my way to strike that down, to harass those people, to make sure that they have a harder time to succeed than, say, Tom Vassell would have to try. And then I will blame them for playing identity politics and say, like, it's only fair, only the best of the best get to perform. That's not how it works. That is a bullshit dodge of an argument. Yeah. Trolls. That's my point. But then it got me thinking about this is going to be probably a longer segment than usual. God damn it. Look at how this happens. It got me thinking, though, about whether or not board games are meritocratic. Like, the games themselves. And this is just like almost an aside, but I've been thinking about it all week. I tend to think of board games as one of the most meritocratic hobbies, like the actual game itself and the playing of a game. So, for instance, like an illustration of this would be Magic the Gathering is not meritocratic. It is not purely about skill. Magic the Gathering is a game that you can actually purchase your way to victory. If you want to, I think I've talked about this on the show before, I sort of quit that game at some point in the hobby because I hit that barrier of, if I want to be any better at this game, I'm going to have to start to invest a lot of money. And I didn't want to do it, so I stopped, because you can actually just purchase cards that are so overpowered and so hard to deal with that you could just sort of barrel over people who have just a very basic deck with not a lot of good cards. Compare that to something like Ashes, Rise of the Phoenixborn, where everybody has the same cards, and so everybody has the same chance based on your skill in building a deck and your skill on playing those cards. That is, on the surface, a far more meritocratic game system. That it isn't about speculation of cards. It's about how well can you play what's in the box. And I tend to think board games are that. You know, it's not Warhammer. It's not Magic the Gathering. It's not, I don't know, what's another example? I can't think of one. Of a game where you have to purchase individual little bits and armies and goods, and that will reflect your whether or not you succeed. Board games, everything you need to play it is in the box. And it would appear on the surface that is a meritocracy. Everybody's got the same shot from the start. But what I would like to suggest is it's not that simple. Nothing is that simple. So if you're going to play a game like Hansa Teutonica or Through the Ages or anything where there's sort of a lot of aggressive player interaction. Those games are going to privilege players who are comfortable with aggression. Aggressive play against people that take Smash Up is a good example. Where you're constantly having to get in the face and ruin the plans of somebody else. I just played Food Chain Magnate last night, and several times throughout the game, we had to just flat out get in somebody's way to keep them from doing the thing that they wanted to do, so they didn't run away with the game. Just come and shit all over their plans for no other reason than to stall their engine. Those games are going to privilege an aggressive playstyle. And what we know from studies in particular is that, or studies have shown, that is a particularly male playstyle. Not across the board. I'm not saying that women can't possibly play aggressive games and play aggressively, but there are several studies out there, I'll have to find the links because I didn't even bother to look them up, that say that when watching men and women play games, it's men go for victory and women tend to try to preserve the relationships at the table over pursuing victory. So when it comes to a moment of, are you going to screw your opponent over, or are you going to maintain your connection to them as a person, women tend toward the pattern of maintaining that relationship over doing whatever it takes to win. So that game, even though it's all contained within the box, that stops being a meritocracy of made the best gamer win. It becomes wrapped in all of the social mores that we're already bringing to the table. So the game itself is not an isolated vacuum, and it never can be. Yeah. I don't know. I think that's an interesting concept, and I've been thinking about it all week, and maybe I'll try to think about it deeper and talk about it on another segment. But what I came on this week to say, let's cut the bullshit, okay? There is space for everyone in this hobby. It is not zero sum. Everybody gets to contribute. And if you see harassment online of our female contributors in particular, step up, speak up, talk back to whoever you have to talk back to. We're not going to allow this nonsense to continue. And we certainly are not going to allow this nonsense to continue under the banner of, fair is fair, just try harder if you want to hang in there kind of attitude. That's certainly not the case. That's not the way this works. It is a cowardly dodge of responsibility for what they really want to say, which is that they just don't want women to succeed in this hobby, and that is absolutely not going to work. Trolls, okay, who don't listen to this show, but go out and troll hunt this week. And tell them Mariner sent you. Okay, that's my time. I'm way over time now. Thank you for having me. I'm Nick Mariner on Twitter at The Good Mariner. Thanks.
This is buffoonery, blackadry, and phlegmatic discombobulation. 'Tis the classic review.
Good afternoon, sir. Are you looking for something in particular or just browsing? Something special, you say? Well, you are in luck. We've just received a new shipment of Kickstarter games, tactical miniature games with dice-based combat, more than 420 unique sculpts, 28 custom dice, and a unique... Yes, I agree. They do come across as a little decadent. Then how about a selection of microgames? A tiny fraction of the components and only half price of a regular board game. Ah, I see. You do not want to come across as cheap. Of course, I understand. If I may be so bold, are you perhaps looking for a game to share with that special lady friend? Oh, I'm sorry, gentleman friend, of course. But it is a special game you're looking for. Am I correct? One that maybe captures you as much as it will captivate your gentleman friend. Now, you strike me as somebody with hidden depths. someone who is too often overlooked because he doesn't scream and beg for people's attention. Would you agree? Would it be fair to say that you are somewhat reserved in your interactions? But behind that calm and mellow exterior, that some might even mistake for dullness, an active and very sharp mind is working tirelessly. Would it be also fair to say that despite your wardrobe being decidedly, let's say vintage, you do know your way around some very modern developments? You are up to date with the current trends and fashions without being taken in by them. You choose your interests carefully, with an eye on the big picture, fully aware that every decision people make sets off a cascade of changes that only the most observant and strategically minded are sharp enough to pick up on. And are you looking for a game that encapsulates you honestly without reservation or trickery? Well, sir, I believe I have just the game for you then. I promise a delightful, fantastic, and deeply engrossing experience that is as much an expression of you as it is of gaming and the classic European era at its most refined. Let me just quickly tell my colleague in the storeroom to bring you a copy.
Oi, Diggsy! Get us a copy of Concordia, will ya? Chop chop, man's waiting.
Now, would that be debit card, Visa, or would you like to pay cash? Oh, thank you, sir. I would say I hope you enjoy the game with your friend, but I already know you will. No, thank you, sir.
Verily, 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 perambulate to the terminus.
With mechanics so precisely and beautifully put together, Concordia is truly the quintessence of harmony.
Easily one of the very best entries in its genre, Concordia is as refined as it is engrossing, despite a ludicrously outdated and outmoded presentation.
Dodds Bodkins, Georgie? What's that belly thing crouching down in the belly corner? No idea, but it's chewing on salted gringo berries with its sniffer.
So the elephant comes into the room, Georgios, and he's wearing a spacesuit, and then next time he's wearing a toga, and then 5 minutes later he's wearing a stovepipe hat like Isambard Kingdom Brunel.
Yes?
So I guess the elephant in this room is this game is ostensibly themeless, and does the gameplay make up for that?
It more or less does. I think I wouldn't call it themeless so much as uninspiring and very worn out and just nothing to hold on to, really.
Well, the thing is, I sort of balk at the constant, trading in the Mediterranean, it's been seen a million times, idea that that's a bad thing. What?
Well, it's not inherently a bad thing. I think the bad thing is the last part. It's been seen, it seems done. It seems over. It seems overplayed, overexposed, over anything you want.
But this game, and many games like it, you use something as a backdrop to allow the mechanical integration and the working of the game to shine. And fundamentally, it kinda doesn't matter, and that, to me, doesn't matter.
I don't know about that. I think thematic integration and backdrop, I believe the game shines much more if it's supported by the theme or if the theme helps you get into it faster. I think none of this applies with Concordia.
That's true, but then again, I don't think the gameplay suffers because of that.
That I agree with, yes, that I agree with. But if I were to commend it on how it deals with theme, or if I were to commend the game on how it deals with theme, it would be because the theme makes the game more accessible, it makes the game more interesting, an easier sell to people. And I think if anything, the game suffers because it's a hard sell if you look at the box, even if it's in its fourth iteration, actually adds quite a bit of color and quite a bit of shading. And when you explain it to people, it does simply not seem engaging and fun until you sit down and play it.
The thing is, I don't agree with you on this because you see a plethora of these games come out. And I hear people in the hobby talk about it in the terms that I'm about to talk about. When I see a game that just looks like an absolute euro, and it hasn't given any concession to sort of prettiness, attractiveness, shelf presence, box stimulation, all of that sort of stuff. I look at that and I think, that's a game I want to try. Yeah. Because it's no, you may not. I mean, then that's fine.
No, I disagree on the point that what it says to me is not, I consciously reject the idea of wanting to appeal to people. I consciously...
No, it's not that. It's saying I want to appeal to a certain constituency. And it's people who understand that this game is not about flavor text. This game is not about doing things that imply you're doing other things. This game is about purely a work of engineering that you can enjoy as a work of engineering. And those games appeal. And it's a large constituency. And this is why these games come up and up again, because all themes and settings are, in many ways, is about herding people towards what they like. And something like Concordia appeals to me a great deal. I agree with you that the ideal is perfect theme mechanic integration.
Or at least fun enough for one to help the other shine. Whether it's theme supporting mechanics or mechanics supporting theme doesn't really matter to me, but they should be in some sort of symbiotic relationship.
But there is so many games where the theme is just unimportant and the mechanics are just work together so beautifully that I simply don't care. And that can be elevated into the realms of greatness without having that particular facet, which is thematic and mechanical integration.
Sure. I think the underlying tone that I'm picking up on your description is that you have a certain respect for it. A certain, you're kind of impressed by this, by the cleanliness, the elegance, whatever of the mechanics sort of transcending the need of a theme to sell it. I don't have any respect for that. I think it's just, go on, do your job, man. No, but try at least.
No, but the point is, it depends what kind of designer you are. It depends what you're making.
Yeah.
There are certain writers who are incredibly florid and emotional, and there are certain writers that are incredibly distant. There's Stanley Kubrick and there's Steven Spielberg. Very, very different. One that focuses deeply on emotion and one that focuses on the outsider looking in and judging. I don't see that one is inherently better than the other, but it seems to me the games I've played of Matt Gertz's, he's very skilled on one side and understands that that's where his skill set lies. And I don't see an issue with him leveraging his skill set to the greatest degree he can to make something that's great, rather than saying, I need to be an everyman artistically. Well, that doesn't work. It dilutes what you're good at.
I think I've played a Navigador of his. And that worked much better. That was literally more interesting thematically. I came away not liking the game as much as I like Concordia because rules-wise it seemed wonkier. But it's not like it's not in his wheelhouse. That's what I mean. It's not the fact that the thematic integration, just the way it's packaged and the way it's delivered. It's not impossible. It's not like I have these huge standards or something. I just honestly think that they dropped the ball thematically on Concordia. It only works as well and only has the fandom it does because there are enough people who legitimately fell in love with the game itself to push it onto people to overlook the package.
And that's why I think dropping the ball, I don't necessarily think he dropped the ball thematically. I think you're trading in the Mediterranean. I think it's all very plausible. But if I concede that they dropped the ball thematically, if I take that concession, mechanically, it makes that ball dropping utterly insignificant to me. I don't care because the game is so good, so I don't have an issue.
Yeah, maybe. I don't. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of.
I think I would have cared more for the game, and I still quite like it. But it's just practicality of. If I have a game in my collection, I need to sell it to the people coming to my game night. And it's interesting enough. It's a similar problem I have with La Granja. It's a good game. I enjoy the game, but it's so dull. I practically need to beg people to play it with me because they look at it and just go, "Oh, you're running a farm in Mallorca." It's like, oh, is it really good?
Well, this is the point.
And Concordia sort of falls in a similar niche. It's that. Why do I have to sell the game to the people I want to play it with? Why doesn't the game help me?
The thing is, I have no issue selling a game like Concordia. Firstly, because my group very cognizant of what games are and what games they like.
Well, so is mine.
Right. Also, I have a group that like those kind of games and have those attitudes towards thematic consideration.
So does mine.
And also, all I need to do to recommend a game to my group is not to give them a rundown of what the theme is and da-da-da-da. It's just say, look, trust me, this is fucking great. Let's play it and tell me afterwards if you think I'm talking out of my ass. And that's the method I use to recommend games.
Oh, the same with me. But still, I run into the same issues. I think La Granja is a good game. Concordia is a great game. Still, I mean, I need, if people show up on Friday night to play games, at my place, they need to have some sort of, I need to get their buy-in to play this game. I can't constantly just ask, no, trust me, it's going to be fun. La Granja was the same thing. Everyone I've played it with said, it's fun. Concordia, same thing. Yeah, it's fun. I'd like to play it again. But then suggesting it, you go, yeah, it was fun.
And that's the thing, right?
Weird.
You can't legislate for the people who are playing.
Yeah.
And clearly your group operates in a different way than mine. And so we're never going to agree on this because I think you fundamentally don't think the same way that I think with regards to thematic integration.
Yeah, I don't think it's much like rules. I don't think they're ever meaningless.
Right. And the point is, I agree. I will concede with you. If you're talking about the acme, if you're talking about the very top, the very peak, the very aspiration, I believe is to integrate them as perfectly as you can, to really immerse the player in having them thinking they're doing what you're implying to them.
Oh, but yeah, but that wasn't the argument. I agree. I see that this is great. It's commendable, yes, but that's not the argument I'm making. That's not what I'm criticizing Concordia for.
Then what are you criticizing it for?
It looks drab and dull and boring.
Whereas to me, it doesn't look drab, dull, boring. People complain about the woman on the front cover.
She looks increasingly better with every new cover I see.
The woman on the front cover looks a lot like my ex-girlfriend, and I was very much in love with my ex-girlfriend, so that doesn't bother me. I mean, it causes me sometimes pain in the heart, but that really is not a consideration of mine. And so fundamentally, if the game shines, I'm good with it.
Yeah, I need more than a good game. There are enough good games out there. Well, let's move on to experience.
So, my good man, what was your appraisal of my coquettish daguerreotypes?
Indeed, it was certainly an arresting diversion.
I'm going to give you a quick précis of my experience with this game because I've had a not a 180, but maybe a sort of 47-degree turn on this.
You turn right wing.
I've always been right wing, Georgios. I just hide it. No, so the reason I bought this game is because I was listening to a number of podcasts, and I think Secret Cabal was one that really turned me onto this because they were talking about this, and then they said, Rodney, from what you played, recommended it to them, and then they played it, and it was wonderful. And they were really effusive about how good they thought this game was. And so I thought, well, then I'm going to give it a go. And I bought it, and I played it, and I didn't grok it. And I thought this was fine. Then I played it again, and I thought, yeah, it's fine. Then I played it the other night, and whatever alchemy had worked over the intervening weeks and months since I'd played it last transmuted this game from something that I thought was fine, that I was debating selling, to now one of my favorite games. There was that true meeting of minds, and all four of us who were playing the game seemed to be in sync with our enthusiasm, to the point when we finished the game and I lost by 2 points. It's totally unjust.
It should have been more.
We sort of stood up and spent sort of 2 minutes just looking at the board in appreciative silence. I mean, really, I'm not lying here. I'm not over-egging it. Really, we did. And there was that real spread of warmth. And one of the guys turned round and said, we all feel really satisfied now, don't we? And then we all went, yeah. And that experience really made me fall in love with this game. And it was the first time in a long time that that's happened.
That's interesting because my trajectory was the exact opposite.
Right.
I played it the first time I played it was a few weeks ago. a 2-player game. And I think by the third turn, we both looked at each other and just went, oh my God, this game is amazing. It's fantastic. We just couldn't believe how good it was. And we keep playing and enjoying it and all the intricacies. And then I played it again with my regular group, and that didn't quite work that well. And then I played it again with my regular group with a different combination of players. And again, it didn't work for some reason. Again, let me plug the Patreon again. I go into more details to what I think the reasons were, but it came down to the fact that, I think player count plays a huge role in this game. I enjoyed it with 2 players the most. 3, and I believe I've played it with 4, but I can't remember right now. But 3 at least didn't quite work as well as it did, unless my memory's failing me. 4 players also didn't convince me. But for the most part, with 2 players, it was great. It was great fun. It was interesting. It was engaging. It was, I had a handle on things, and the more we increased the player count, the weirder it got. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with personalities and group dynamics and stuff like that. I want to return to this game with a bigger game, with a bigger player count, and just, pay attention to group dynamics, pay attention to how actions interact, how certain strategies and how certain approaches to playing this game result in certain types of game experience. But this is really what I came down to. When I played with 2 players, and we were, I think, in a purely Euro mindset. I guess I'm just calling it that because it led to the best possible experience I've had with this game. It works perfectly.
I mean,
It's
I
amazing.
found this game I played the other night, and I'll focus on this because this was an incredible experience. Is that all 4 of us sort of operated in different ways. There was one guy who just took over the one corner of the board.
Right.
I was sort of hopping around, popping bits in different areas. And there were other people who were sort of desperately trying to carve out areas of the map, and if not doing different things, building new colonists and things like this. I didn't build new colonists and only towards the end of the game. And so we all played these different strategies. So no one was really stepping on each other's toes. So we were all kind of able to do what we wanted to do, but we were also limited simply by the geographic presence of other people on the board. Also, there was the wonderful moments where okay, next turn, I'm going to buy the card. And then someone just buys the card from under you. And he's like, now I've got to completely rejigger my plans. And it was never frustrating. It was just challenging. And I found this game utterly, utterly challenging. And what the game mechanically allowed me to do was shift my axis, was do different things, was move in different directions. I never felt limited. And it was truly the mechanics promoting interaction between players. So it was only players that were limiting my chances. It was never the game limiting my chances.
Right.
And so that felt really satisfying.
This keeps coming up, like when you describe these situations where somebody takes something away from you and you're going, oh, and I hate those moments. I really have no enjoyment. I take absolutely no enjoyment because I feel like, oh, come on. Now, I think the fascinating thing about this experience, and I think that's why I even came up with the idea of being a pure Euro, or playing it like a pure Euro, is that, I liked having a handle on this ever-shifting sea of options and chances and rewards and ideas and things you can do. This is something that I don't like about lesser Euros. The fact that once you've sort of settled into your turn, into the strategy you want to pursue, it feels samey. It feels like now it's just playing out variations of what I want to do. I want to do A, B, and C. And if I can't do A, I'll do A1 and then try to go to B and then to C. It always seems like once you've settled on a path, it's just how to best see through this path over and over and over again until the game is over. And that's one of the main reasons why I'm not excited by the Euro game genre as it is. And that's why I really, really like Concordia, because it's not that. Every turn is not a challenge, but it throws new things at you. It asks you to think on your feet. It asks you to not settle on one thing, because that's just going to, it's basically going to, it feels like you're limiting yourself to what you could achieve if you just stick if you focus too much on just one thing, on just repeating the same thing over and over again.
It's an ever-shifting kaleidoscope of choices, and all the choices are good.
What is the result of gout, 9-day Adventism, and a touch of the vapors?
Yourself?
That's constructiviness.
Each and others, all you others, take a back seat.
This should be the bulk, because we both agree this is not a... Well, the experience is pleasant. It's the design that blew both of us away.
Well, I think the real heart of this game lies in how ostensibly simple what you're doing is. On your turn, you play a card and you do what the card says. That's all you do. And from that simple action blooms this incredible profundity and just huge breadth of decision trees that end up making the game incredibly rewarding. And I just can't tell you how full of admiration I am for just that aspiration to give birth to complexity from simplicity. It is the acme of elegance. And that is a real achievement, no?
Yes, it is very elegant. I think the fact that you just play a card and you do what it says, I think that's just, you pick an action. You have a hand of cards which describes the number of action, the kind of actions you have. It's basically a action selection menu you have, and you always have the choice of resetting it, because once you do an action, it's gone until you reset your action selection, get all the cards back into your hand. That's interesting because it forces you into having fewer and fewer options as you play until you reset. And then, in addition to that, the two things that are really brilliant and that really heighten the interactivity of this game. And I'm not talking about necessarily about player interactivity, but that kind of Eurogame interactivity that people love. Every decision you make, every decision another player makes, changes the options on the board fundamentally.
Right.
You play a card, and one of the ways in which this is achieved is the diplomat card. You have a card which allows you to copy somebody else's card they've played before you. So you play a card, you put it on a deck, on a face-up pile in front of you. That's your deck, and the diplomat card allows you to copy one of those cards you can see. So that if for example you've played your colonized cards already, you don't have them in your hand anymore, but somebody else has just played it. On your turn, you can play the diplomat card to copy that effect, which leads to this amazing moment where you're not only paying attention to what others are doing, which is always, I think, a weak point in a lot of Euro games, that you don't need to do that, but you're also at some point trying to predict when they're going to do it. So you're keeping your diplomat card in hand, just, so you can do it later. So you start to plan your moves ahead, not in a negative way, but in a predictive way, like, oh, I can optimize my actions.
And it's wondering then, is my card with this action on it more valuable than my diplomat? Should I play this now, or should I play the diplomat to leverage that? And what I found was a real shift in what cards became important at what points. So when I played it the other night, I thought at the beginning, this wasn't just this wonderful serendipitous, beautiful experience right from the beginning. At the beginning, I was like, I kind of understand why I don't like this game very much, was because I thought only one card has any value, and that's the architect. And the architect is the card that lets you move and build. Yeah. And I thought, well, the architect's the only one. All the rest of this is shit. I just want to use the architect again and again and again. And how wrong I was, and how it vacillated. Then the market became hugely important. Then the diplomat became hugely important. Then leveraging my ability to get certain resources to allow me to do certain things became important. And then when you couple that with the fact you're not only buying cards to build an engine, you're buying cards to tell you how well you're going to do at the end. And once you factor that level of thought on top of it, then you have this absolutely incredible, juicy machine that every decision factors on every other decision, and every other person's decision factors on your decisions. Yeah. And it's just such a compote of interestingness.
Yes, and another aspect that, because you mentioned engine building, or deck building even, in this case, it's easy to assume that the engine that you're building is the action cards that you buy, that you have in your deck. But, and this is again one of the very clever things about this game, it's very brilliant, part of your engine is also your presence on the board itself. Right. It's where you get your resources from. It's where you get sometimes money from to buy other things. And so you need to sort of build that part of the engine as well, which you do by using the engine of your deck. So basically you have two engines working together, and these this engine on the board, this resource generator on the board, is again dependent on other players, because if somebody races you, is first in a city that you want to be in, you need to pay. It's going to cost you a lot.
And what's so clever is resource production gives other people resources too.
Right.
So you're in a region, and anyone who's got a building on the cities within the region, when the region produces, they get that resource that the city produces. So I had a situation where the player before me did something that kind of screwed me.
Right.
The previous turn, I'd activated the region and gave him the resource that had enabled him in the following turn to do something to screw me.
Right.
That's exceptional.
Yeah, it's a nice combination, yeah.
Because, you're hoping that your actions, and so in so many Eurogames, you produce and you get your resources and they're your resources. But producing can fundamentally shift the balance of power in the game. And so you have to know when to leverage that production. That's another level, again, which is just so clever and interesting.
Yeah, and I think, I will spoil something. This was basically the little lever that sort of led to I think, as far as I can tell, led to a slightly negative experience later on, in that there is a way to play Eurogames which is negative.
Yes.
There is a way that purposefully is about denying people benefits. It's purposely denying people the ability to move ahead by blocking them, by playing things that that give the least possible benefit to them, all these kinds of things. I found that when we've played, or when I've been in a group at a table where Concordia was played in a negative way, it soured my experience.
Right.
It became dull, it became dry, it became a game that was almost, not quite passive-aggressive, but at least very, what's the word? Well, the dominating feeling was one of, there was this underlying feeling of envy.
There's ways of playing games and genres of games that break them in any sort of way. If you have a social deduction game which is based on talking, one person overriding everyone, or just people refusing to talk, it breaks the game. Merit-trash games sort of just, one way I've seen Merit-trash games be ruined is just a sort of, your standard Euro-y player just sitting there going, oh God, this is terrible. This is bloody terrible. It ruins a game.
Well,
mechanically, you can play in such a way that limits your ability to open up the possibilities of the game.
Yeah.
No question.
Yeah.
And what you need to do is play with optimists.
Exactly. I think this is what it comes down to. And I'm not, this sounds like I'm blaming him for the bad game, and maybe I am to some degree, but I understand where they're coming from.
Right.
Because that approach to Eurogames is valuable, sensible, and even the right thing to do in in this genre. There are games that are predicated on this idea, no, you're supposed to play as negatively as you can. You're supposed to deny people options. You're supposed to screw them over whenever you can, because that's the only way to get ahead.
And that's the problem. Victory above all in any situation, whether it be business, whether it be games, whether it be
sex.
Exactly.
Oh no, I'm not sure.
Well, it depends on your definition of victory. But victory above all can be cancerous. Victory above all can sour experiences. And what we come back to is our bullshit sort of hippie thesis. If this show has a thesis, I guess this is it.
We are hippie bullshitters.
Is that the experience is what you're working towards, not the victory of the game.
Exactly. And I think one of the false gods of board gaming definitely is the conflation of victory and a good experience. The idea that not only by following victory, but I'm not even saying you can only have fun when you win. It's not even that. It's like only by following victory can you have fun. And this is dangerous. I think, admittedly, a lot of games, the really good games manage to really fuse those two. When playing towards your victory actually increases the fun of the game. There are those games and they're great, but there are quite a lot of games where those two goals are just, in the vicinity of one another, quite identical.
If the best way to win a game is by grinding, if the best way to win a game is by denying people the ability to do stuff, then you're not going to have fun. You're going to win the game, but the game isn't going to be great. And I found this game, it might just be the people I was playing with, I found the very design of the game facilitated decisions that were fun for all of us.
Are you saying that the fun of the Eurogame was dependent on the players you played it with?
No.
game made me desirous to play.
So this made me want to play another game that I think explores another area of the Euro game.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this, Concordia, which is very muscular, very tight, very little flesh on the bones. The mechanics serve the game, and you don't argue that there's anything superfluous.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
This is an efficient game made by an efficient designer. So I want to play something that is on the other end of the scale, still absolutely definitely a Euro game, but not a game you could criticize for being penurious. And that is Caverna. Mm-hmm. And I played it once, and it comes into this realm of the Uwe Rosenberg sandbox, for want of a better term. Mm-hmm. There are a million things you can do, and you can choose them all the time. There's no limit on your options, and I generally find this unappealing. Right. I want my game experience to be curated. I think part of the design job is to open up the decision tree of a game, not just to slap everything on a table and then let you make the decision. I found Fields of Arla really suffered from that too. And so I want to play Caverna again to just see, really, do I think that the curated experience is hugely superior to the open world experience?
Interesting. See, I struggled. I still struggle to find a game that it makes me want to play. I thought maybe I want to play deck build or something that, focus on the deck building element of it. And I have a few in my collection and I like them a lot. And I do like playing them. Like I have Dominion, which I haven't played in years because my game group doesn't want to. I have Eminent Domain, which I really like, which is pretty much a deck builder. I've played Big Book of Madness recently again, which is also has a heavy deck building element to it. But that's not quite it. That's not quite the game that makes me want to play. I think what it makes me want to play is a generic Euro. I want to play a Euro the way I've played Concordia, to have a lot of fun with it, and to play it again with any of these games coming out this year, on any of these more or less, not run of the mill, it sounds like I'm diminishing them, but like a good example of a Euro game, a solid Euro game. And I want to see how it measures up, how my experience measures up to Concordia, to any other Euro game, a Stefan Feld game maybe, and see how it works. What are the differences? Are they really fundamentally different? Is there really something about Concordia that makes it unique? Or is it just, do they just have this, does Concordia just have the right combination of ingredients that other Euro games didn't have for me? So what it makes me want to play is basically any Euro game that people like, to see how it measures up to Concordia.
To the accompaniment of screams, Georgios, we exit this Halloween season.
Yes, we do. Well, there are fun screams, right? You can have a fun scream.
You decide. So how do people get in touch with us?
Well, screaming works, but we probably won't hear you unless you're in Essen. Oh, we'll be in Essen. Find us.
Scream at us in Essen.
At Ben. I have very sensitive ears. Yes, you can find us on infoperfected.com. You can email us at infoperfected@gmail.com. You can Twitter at us at infoperfected or at perfectedinfo. You can look at our pictures on Instagram, which is called Perfect Information. You can look us up on Facebook, which is Perfect Information Podcast. You can find us on Board Game Geek, which is the guild, number 2348, where there are people talking about things we did. And I think that's more or less it. And we're also on iTunes and Stitcher. And if you want to leave us a review there, that would be very kind.
Now, I have a recommendation for you, because a listener, Danny Perello, you might have heard us talk about him on the guild, sent me the most wonderful thing in the world. In my BGG Secret Santa, I was given the Colonists. I love the Colonists, but it's an absolute bear to organize. And Danny sent me one of his laser cut inserts for the game. I'm playing it this afternoon, and it's going to make my life a hell of a lot easier. So if you want great inserts, if you want D&D pulls, if you want to feel good about yourself, go to etsy.com/magnificent meeples. Buy an insert from Danny. You won't regret it.
Yes, and actually I was serious about being in Essen. We are in Essen. If you are also in Essen during Spiel, we'll be running around the halls. There's a meetup actually.
At 3 o'clock.
A drink up more like.
Yeah, 3 o'clock Thursday afternoon at the ale stand.
Exactly. You need to figure out where that is. And other than that, I think if you've seen a video on YouTube, I think it's youtube.com/perfectinformation, you probably know what we look like. We don't know what you look like. So tell us or show us what you look like by talking to us. We might play a game.
And finally, just to wrap up, we've been doing extra shows recently.
Yes.
That is a direct response to the help you've given us on Patreon. So if you like the extra shows and if you want to facilitate us doing that, doing videos, come to patreon.com/perfect information. The future of the show and the future of digital media in general.
And mankind, mostly mankind,
is on your shoulders.
Yes. Also, just a quick preview. Next month, which is November, you'll see a brand new show from us, a new format, and we will be talking. Well, it's not that new, but we'll talking about role playing it.
Indeed. So I'm going to go to find out who was screaming, Georgios, and I'm going to giggle at their agony.
All right.
Say goodnight.
No, I'm getting on a train to Essen.